the power of mind. Reptilians try to undermine the oldest bones what them find African mind. African face and these things by African mind. Haters push for you to hate your African skin and say forget about slavery while it's still happening. Don't lose your African heart, lion heart. Seek and you shall find by design. So why you lose your African mind? African talk, African.
Shalom everybody, and welcome to the Who Are the Hebrew Israelites series. And I'm your host, Dion Talley. Thank you for joining us. And before we begin, I'd like to get started first by saying that this is a comprehensive study. This is not a study of pictures and graphs and all of those things. I'm sorry to disappoint, but this is a story. It's not so even much a story, but a study, I should say, of our people and our lineage, and evidences from the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, to our people. And throughout this series, we'll prove that the scriptures are indeed written for our people, the people who are descendants of slaves. But before we begin, I wanted to focus on in this particular series, because I feel like there's no sense of even going ahead or going further into our studies, into our Hebrew Israelite narrative and who we are. Contrary to what you've been hearing and what you've saw on videos from other black men or whatever, this is a comprehensive study. This is the study where we will focus on the things written from our forefathers and their intended understanding of them, and how they're not supposed to be mixed with the captors which they foresaw we would be in captivity to. Having said that, I wanted to start with first, let me reiterate that. I wanted to reiterate the fact that most of our people don't understand the difference between a religion and a bloodline. A bloodline is something that you can see your children and their children's children, obvious. But a religion is something that's adopted. It's a way of thinking. It's a school of thought. It's a combination of values and principles and what seems to be morality, but it's different from a bloodline, and it's different from the provisions and prophecies and commandments and the cultural ordinances confined to that bloodline. And that's what the Hebrew Israelites are. The world, as we know it, particularly our people, we are subjected to a religion. This is the reason why the two are so antithetical. One is a bloodline, one is a religion. And to make that clear, we're going to go to some scriptures and start with it. This is a tool. Most of the men that you see that are professing Hebrew Israelites haven't really understood the depth of prophecy and the tools that are available to us to understand the scriptures as they were intended. And in this case, let's look at the eSword. That's what the tool I'm using today. And this is a tool that takes the scriptures back into their original Hebrew. Okay? And the Dead Sea Scrolls and the paper papyruses and, copper scrolls and things that they were found on, they were written in this language. And these languages have a definition to them, as like any other language. Most of our people have been focusing on the language itself and the speech, the phonics, how you pronounce the words, different dialects, things that really have nothing to do with our narrative. There are 70 languages in the world that are known official languages. And all of them needed to be, because our people are scattered all over the world, so we have to have translations for each one of these languages. So the emphasis should never have been on any particular translation, whether it's English or French or whatever. Having said that, the original Hebrew is the focus because that's the language that it was speaking in. So whatever definition of the words that they were speaking in, or the language that they spoke it in, is the definition that we should be focusing on. Okay? Well, at any rate, this scripture here is the hallmark and the cornerstone of pretty much our existence here in captivity and in Babylon, known as America. And it says here that as he said unto Abram, Abram is the father of the Hebrews, the father of the nations, but he's particularly the father of the Hebrews because the promise and covenant made with him is made with him and his descendants only. He's just the father of the other nations. Now it says here, he said to Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. Okay? Now most people say, well, automatically, particularly religion, because it doesn't focus on them, and it doesn't have anything to do with their narrative, immediately they assume that this is talking about the Egyptian captivity. And we know that can't be the Egyptian captivity, because the Egyptian captivity in Exodus 12:40 tells you the difference between that and the captivity we're talking about now. Excuse me for the little mix-up. 12:40. And this tells you how long, when Moses delivered the children of Israel from Egypt, how long they were in there. And it says a mixed multitude also went up with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And this is where a lot of things we're going to get into in future studies, but we're going to look at this just as a little caveat. We're going to look at this, the mixed multitude that went in there, right? So you understand what this word and how important the language in which it speaks of and how important it is, okay? And so let's look at that. And it says, now he went up with, let me go back to where I was, and he said he went with a mixed multitude, right? Okay, now what is that? Arab, right? So this comes from this word, right? It says from this word. Okay, so let's look that up. Okay, this e-sword is your primary tool. You'll have no understanding without this tool. And this is an Arab. To braid, to intermix, to traffic, to give, to be security, exchange, engage, to meddle, to mingle, to mortgage, to occupy, to give pledges, to come into Syria, to undertake. So it means to braid, to intermix, technically to traffic. And if you know anything about the Islamic or the Ishmaelite slave trade or the Arabic slave trade, as they would have you believe it, they're telling you that this is the mixture. How are they a mixture? They're a mixture of Egyptians, who was Hagar, the father of the Ishmaelites was Hagar, the mother of the Arabs, because he was the woman or the handmaid that Abraham had fathered Ishmael. Well, at any rate, continuing, there's just a little caveat to let you know the Arabs are mixed people. That's why they have that in-between white, in-between black complexion. They have that demeanor that's not our people, thinking that, you know, in that area and the type of affliction that they've been under with the Europeans, that they would have some kind of camaraderie or some kind of kinship or affection, empathy for what we go through. Not a chance. That's because they're mixed. They're mingled. They're mutts. But I digress. Well, anyway, it says here, and let's go back. It says here in 1240, it says, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all of the host of Yahweh, I don't see who's the Lord, that's a European construct, anyway, went out from the land of Egypt. Okay? 2 times, 430 years, at the end of 430 years. So there's no way that you could mistake those two. Okay? So this prophecy here, going back to Genesis 15, this prophecy says that know of a surety that thy seed, okay? Now that's where we have to focus on. This shows relationship to blood. It's not religion, not something you can proselyte to, something you can convert to. This is something that your seed, so they're saying that this was going to be a racial issue. Because we know that it turned out to be a racial issue. All right, now it says your seed. The Hebrew word for that is zerah. It says your fruit, your plant, your sowing time, your posterity, your child. Okay, nothing to do with religion there. Okay, so if we go back there and we start from here, we know that right now, this is our biggest issue with our people, is that we don't discern the difference between a religion and a bloodline. This 400 years that we arrived here in 1619 pertains to a particular bloodline. There's just no other way around it. Now, on the other hand, our people who can't seem to get out of their own way and embrace either of them, so, excuse me, they become sort of, you ever heard of the term stumbling block? When you conflate religion with this narrative for the Hebrews, it becomes a stumbling block, and you never learn. You never move forward, and you consider yourself awoke, but you're not awoke until you can discern the difference between the two. That's just the facts. Okay, now let me take you to where I'm going to begin first. I'm going to first begin in Wikipedia to give you an understanding of what I mean by that. Now, this is the term Pauline Christianity. Pauline Christianity, or Pauline theology, also known as Paulism or Paulianity, or Paulanity, otherwise referred to as Gentile Christianity. Now, who wrote 3/4 of the New Testament? Paul. Everybody understands that. That's universally understood. Okay, so if that's understood, it says it's theology and the form of Christianity which developed from the beliefs and doctrines espoused by the Hellenistic Jewish apostle Paul. And we're going to prove that he wasn't even an apostle. Through his writings and through the New Testament writings traditionally attributed to him. Paul's benefits were rooted in the earliest Jewish Christianity, but deviated from the Jewish Christianity and their emphasis on inclusion of the Gentiles. See, he deviated because he knows the Gospels exclude the Gentiles. And we're going to go to that in a minute. And it says in the new covenant, and he said in the rejection of circumcision as unnecessary token of upholding the law. So he was teaching people to not be circumcised. And basically, if you know anything about Paul, you know that the premise of his studies were that he was antithetical to the law, or that he was teaching people that the law created bondage, and that the New Testament, that they were freed in his Jesus that he preached, and that he was bringing to the Gentiles. Made it clear that he was only there to bring this gospel to the Gentiles, because it was understood that the Messiah had chosen the 12 disciples to bring the gospel to the Hebrews, or to the children of Israel, the lost sheep, as it were. So let's get that straight from the gate. Well, at any rate, we're going to start getting to the scriptures, and we're going to make our case against him, because we can't go on into this series about who we are and what our narrative is, particularly the prophecies that detail everything that we're going through, we've been through, and what we're going to go through. You can't see that as long as you're conjoining these two narratives together. And the oil and water. One's for one people and one's for another. And as long as we embrace the opposite of what is ours, and have them suppress what's ours and promote what's theirs, this is why we have this stalemate in information and in knowledge that we've had for the last 400 years. You know that they changed our names. Their ship manifested, proven, from the ships that were used as slave vessels going back to the 1700s with the names of Yah's people, his name in them, YAH and all of these names. But that's another story, showing that when we got here, we were baptized into Christianity and you got a Christian name. Okay, so that's where things began. So automatically that began your journey into this culture and the subjection of it, because it's hardwired into Christianity, particularly the letters from Paul, that this was your place in humanity, that you were the slave, and that you were to treat him as though he was your Messiah or your God or your master, as it were. Continuing, let's go to the scriptures and let's go to the book of Acts, because that's where we're going to start all of our, okay? And let's find out a little bit about Acts 13:1. Let's see. Okay. All right. Now it says, now there was a church that was at Antioch, where certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch. You see that word Herod? We're going to get into that later. And Saul. So this is before he had his conversion, or during the time he had his conversion. And as they ministered, and it fasted, and the Holy Ghost, notice not the Holy Spirit, the ghost is like Casper the Ghost and all of the apparitions. See the words? Language is everything. And this is the reason why they chose ghost instead of spirit. And separate me Barnabas and Saul for the work wherein I have called them. So this is when he started using Paul instead of Saul. But notice who he's around. He's around Herod the Tetrarch. Now let's look at who Tetrarch is. All right? Tetrarch. Okay, the ruler of the fourth part of a country. So this is the same Herod that was used. Let me give you an illustration. I could show you better than I could tell you. Let me give you an illustration from... And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 crowns upon his head. We're going to get into that later on. That's Enoch. He's describing you spiritually what the representation of the 7 heads and the 10 horns, which makes up the dragon, and that whole description and mythology that people attribute to the dragon. Well, there's a spiritual contribution to that, and it's deep. It's beyond anything that any of our scholars are even skimming upon. They're not even scratching the surface. And it says, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now we know this from the story talking about Satan, where Satan drew a third of the angels, cast them to the earth, and the Most High cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman. They're speaking up in terms of time, and the element of time has no bearing here, because he's skipping from when the Most High threw him out to when Messiah was getting ready to be born for Mary. And he says for her to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And it says her child was caught up unto Yahweh. not God, but to Yah, and to his throne. So while that slaughter of the innocents and woman who fled the wilderness where she had a place prepared of Yah, that they should feed her there 1,203 days. Okay, which is 1,260 days, 3.5 years. All right, now let's look at what that means. Let me go into the okay. Slaughter of the innocents, massacre of the innocents, the natively narrative of the Gospel of Matthew, which Herod the Great, king of Judah, orders the execution of all male children 2.5 or 2 years old and under in the vicinity of Bethlehem. And the Catholic Church regards them as the first Christian martyrs. And their feast and Holy Innocents' Day and the Feast of Holy Innocents is celebrated on the 28th of December. 3 days after their Christmas, huh? And the majority of Herod biographers and probably a majority of biblical scholars hold the event to be myth, legend, or folklore. Okay, the Magi visited to seek guidance from where the king of the Jews had been born, and Herod directs them to Bethlehem and asks them to return and report. And when they warn him in a dream not to do something, the massacre is reported in the Gospel of Matthew. Okay, so this right here is telling you back to the scriptures where they had brought forth and he was standing in place where he was going to devour her child as soon as it was born. That's what this was. That's what the slaughter of the innocent was. This is recorded in history. And it tells you that there was a war broken out in heaven. He tried to go up into heaven and get him. And he said, he fought against the dragons, and the dragon fought in his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our Yah and the power of his Messiah. And for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accuses them before our Yah day and night. Okay? Now he says, now when the dragon saw that the eagle was cast to earth, he persecuted the woman who brought forth the child. Now the woman is represented as the people of the Most High. And the people of the Most High are the descendants, like we're going with the seed. Because the Messiah's father was the Most High. So they had to persecute his mother and the descendants from his mother's side, because the Most High is his father, was Messiah's father. So understanding from that premise, we see that all of her seed to this day is the remnant of her seed. Okay? And the woman was given two great things. That would be Miriam, Yeshua's mother. Yahushua's mother. And it said the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle that she may fly into the wilderness. And we know she went into Egypt to her place where she was nourished 4 times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out his mouth as a flood upon the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away with the flood. That's another prophecy that happened in 360 AD, called the Great Tsunami, where he tried to literally flood Egypt, Jerusalem, everything. He tried to flood the whole northeast Africa. And it says that the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed it up. In history. We'll get to that in the future studies. But back to Paul, understanding that this slaughter of the innocents is attributed to Herod, who, according to this, going back to Acts chapter 13, he was hanging out with this guy. Started a church in Antioch. Antioch is in Syria too, by the way. Understand that. Understand what's going on in Syria in the world today. And this is named after Antiochus, the guy who put the pig from the book of Maccabees. Antioch is named after the guy who put the pig on the altar in the temple. And it was such a fuss from that point on that the Maccabees destroyed it. This was the reasoning for Herod rebuilding it in the days of Messiah. Or they rebuilding it unto Messiah. He just hijacked it or tried to hijack it. The Most High, Messiah didn't do his work in there. He did his work on the streets. But, like I said, we don't want to get off on a tangent, so let's keep moving. Okay, now seeing that, let's go to what Paul was doing. Now we're saying that him devouring, let's look at the narrative. The narrative says that he was going to slaughter her children as soon as, or slaughter her seed as soon as it was born, or slaughter Messiah. And then he made war with the remnant of her seed. Okay, he pledged war, as Revelation 12 says, he pledged war to the remnant of her seed. Now let's look at how Saul immediately came on the scene. All right, he immediately came on the scene. Let's go to, where is that? And let's go to Ananias and Peter. Was it 4? Nope, it would be 6. And it talks about how the church was at Jerusalem. They were scattered abroad, and in Samaria except the apostles and devout men at his burial. So in other words, let's go back down to 7, because Paul was at the stoning of Stephen. And this is the prophecy that Stephen spoke, because he talked about the 400 years in this as well. But at any rate, this is when he made his speech before he was stoned. And the leader of those who stoned him, right, was Saul. And they cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet. So in other words, they stripped him down, stoned them, and took their clothes from him and laid them at Saul's feet. And Stephen called on Yah and said, "Receive my spirit." He didn't say receive my ghost. See the difference? We'll keep moving now. Anyway, we're going to get into some deep stuff about this Paul, right? Now let's go to Acts 22. Now, Acts 22, he tells you that he says, now he is a Jew born in Tarsus, a city in Sicilia, which brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. Gamaliel is, we'll see him. Let's look at Gamaliel. Let me see if I can go into it. Let's start looking to Gamaliel. Okay. All right, let's look at Gamaliel, right? Manasseh, so that's the Hebrew Gamaliel, but we're going to go into the other one where he stood up. Right? So he tells you that there stood up one in the council, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a doctor of the law. He's a Pharisee who had a reputation among the people and commanded them to put the apostles forth a little space. And he said to them, "Ye men of Israel, take heed to yourselves that ye intend to do as touching these men." Okay, so this was when they were gonna, I'm assuming they were going to try to get Stephen into the position they got him in to stone him. So the Pharisees were throwing accusations around because they felt like violation of the law, a tradition carried all the way up into the Catholic Church, where if you didn't follow certain ordinances and principles and things dealing with money mostly, then they had the right to take your life and kill you and do all kind of things with you. So they were making these accusations against Stephen, and Gamaliel was one of the guys that I guess he spoke on their behalf or told them to take pause. So getting back to Acts 22:3, it says, now he was a Jew born in Tarsus, and he was brought up in this city in Tarsus, a city in Sicily, which at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to a perfect manner of the law of the fathers. He didn't say his fathers, he said of the fathers. And it was zealous toward Yah, all as ye are all this day. Now listen, how are you a Jew in terms of the term Jew? First of all, let's explain that right there. You can't be a Jew. And at this time, until AD 70, think about what it is, the mincing the words and semantics and how people not understanding your history, how you can be screwed up in how you understand this, approach it, rather. And a Jew means and infers that you live in Judah, or Yahudah, as it were. And at this time, all of the children of Judah were living in the cities of Judah, the cities of the south of Judah. Okay? So if he was born in Tarsus, he cancels himself out from being a Jew. You can't be a Jew born in a European city. A Yehudi means, this is where the term comes from. Yehudi means that you are of the Yehudi, the tribe of Yehudi. And he tries to say he's born of the tribe of Benjamin, but Benjamin was never allotted any land in Benjamin was never allotted any land in Europe. And he didn't go into captivity. He went into captivity because Benjamin and Judah were in the same lands together. The Most High gave them the same lands, and if you know your history of the Most High and the inheritance that the children of Israel got with Joshua, or Yeshua, as his name in Hebrew is. It's the same translation as Joshua. So at any rate, he was given the land with Judah, Benjamin. So he can't even be a Benjaminite, as he claims. And it says now he was born in Sicily, in Tarsus. All right, Taurus and all that other stuff. This is very deep when you understand Greek mythology and Greek history. All right, and he says, and he was taught the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. That was his fathers, the Pharisees. All right, so we established that Antioch was where Antiochus come from. And we can do a little history on Antiochus. All right, and that's where him and Herod had a church together. This is just leading up, just coming off of him killing Stephen, this Paul. All right, and he tells you, let's look at let's go back and look at Antiochus. Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, this is what Antioch is named after, where they said Christians were first called this in this city. Men were first called, the disciples were first called Christians in this city. Well, this was the guy who put the pig in there. Antiochus Epiphanes. Called him Epiphanes, the mad one. Everybody knew he was crazy. He's a bloodthirsty savage. All right, let's keep moving. All right, so we understand that, okay? Now, let's look at some of the other characters. Let's look at some of the other characters he's been hanging out with. Now, it says, now it came to pass in Iconium, where we get the term icon from, which is always some kind of hero. And if, to be honest with you, let's go back to Herod. Let's go back to Herod for a minute. So you understand my point about them always worshiping superheroes. You see this with the Marvel comics and all of these different Superman and Batman and all that. Well, this is what Herod means. His name means a hero. Heroic. And he, you know, him and his, I don't know if it was him or his father, but they was trying to kill Hebrews. They were trying to kill children, anyone they could find, in order to get at the Messiah. Now let's keep it moving. That says, now he went to Iconium, and since I'm in the Strong's numbers, it says, now they went to a synagogue of the Jews and they spoke, right? And let's talk about 14:12, where he gets to, and they called Barnabas and Jupiter. They had men walking around here called Jupiter, right? It says, of a certain affinity. Now let's go back to for context. I'm skipping ahead of myself. For context, it says, now Paul and Barnabas at Lystra. And there were certain men at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. And the same heard Paul speak, who steadfastly behold him, and perceiving that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, stand on thy feet. And he leaped and walked. And when the people saw them, Paul had done, they lifted up their voices. So he was healing people. Excuse me, saying in the speech in Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. Think about this now. The people saw what they did, and they started saying, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter. Think about this. Jupiter. Think about Greek mythology and Jupiter. All right. Dis, or Dis. Latin Jupiter or Jove. The supreme deity of the Greeks. So the people recognized them in their own people, their own kinship. They were gods to them. In view. Mercurius, let's think about this one. Here's another one. We know Paul, right? Hermes, isn't that Mount Hermon? You know where that comes from? Mount Hermon, the descendant angels from the book of Enoch, the 200 fallen angels that descended on Mount Hermon. Hermes, he hanging around with men called Hermes. The name of the messenger of the Greeks, also of accretion, Hermes and Mercury. So in other words, the name we get Hermes is really Mercury. So y'all walking around here with that Hermes stuff on, that's what you're doing. Because he was the chief speaker. And then the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands unto the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people, which the apostles Barnabas and Paul had heard. So they calling themselves apostles. We're going to get into that, tear that down in a minute. Okay? So we understand that he hanging out with guys in terms of Greeks from Antioch, where Gentiles are, their kinfolk, in a place called Iconium, which to me, you can't make this stuff up. This is just insane. All right, Iconium. Image-like. Likeness. Statue. Profile. Come on, folks. We got to wake up. This is what we subscribe to. And our people know more about Paul and the letters he wrote than they would of any of the narratives of the prophets and their prophecies. They can quote Paul verbatim and don't understand any of it. It's almost like the tax code. You don't understand any of it because it's all mumbo jumbo. And I'll tell you what he'll say. He told us where he says whatever he got to say to convert people. He's all things to all people. And the Most High said we worship him in spirit and in truth. You don't manipulate things just to get somebody to convert to your, that's Gentile nonsense. Well, let's keep moving. All right, now he tells you, let's look at this other guy, first of all. Let's go to another friend of his, which I thought that this was the deepest one. Now, he has an alternate personality, okay? And this alternate personality he talks to, his name is Apollo. Okay, now Apollo He said, now there's a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man. Alexandria is named after Alexander the Great. This is in Egypt. This tells you during the days of the Maccabees and when Hebrews up until the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, as with Egypt, they were subjects or tributary to the Gentiles. Alexander the Great took over in 323 BC, and he had been in control of Jerusalem as well as Egypt since that time. The Gentiles, I should say. First the Greeks, then the Romans. So this Jew came from Alexandria, and he's calling himself a Jew. See, that's the difference. They're saying that they're Jew because they converted. And they were forced to convert by John Hyrcanus, which is in the book of Maccabees. When the Maccabees, one of his descendants of Judah Maccabees, he stood up and conquered all of what considered to be the northern kingdom, which was occupied by Sumerians, which were Europeans, or not necessarily Europeans, but they were Assyrians who had left Babylon and Persia and came back with the Hebrews when they went to rebuild the temple during the days of Cyrus, king of Persia. And it tells you that when they were there, that John Hyrcanus, because they were constantly afflicting them and being at war with them and, dictating different things to afflict them with the Romans, who had been in charge of, that was their empire at the time. John Hyrcanus rebelled, and he kicked them all out and forced them all to convert to the Torah and observing the law. So that was why the deeds of Antiochus were so egregious, because what he did is after they went in there, actually he spurred that. Long story short, Apollos, coming from Alexandria, not a Jew, but they're calling him a Jew, and he's there teaching people. And this Apollos is the same Apollos, and I'm just getting into characters now. I'm going into all of the characters that Paul has associated himself with. Give you an idea. I always tell you about you are the company you keep. And his name is Apollos. All right? Now let's look at that. Who's Apollos? He's another pagan deity. Apollon, the sun, Apollonia, a place in Macedonia. Okay? So he's saying he's from Alexandria, and that's what it means about the devil being the serpent and that being his river. Maybe that could mean something about it in reference to Egypt. But I digress. Anyway, let's continue. It says now, this man was instructed in the way of the Lord and fervent in spirit, and he spoke and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. I won't even begin to speculate on what that could possibly mean. I know for a fact that John didn't baptize him because he wasn't baptizing Gentiles. And he wasn't baptizing anybody who was mixed breed or anybody from anywhere else on the earth. And the Most High tells you that. And I'm going to prove that to you now. So all of you who talk about, that don't mean that, he didn't die for the whole world and not that whole thing. Let's go into that where he says that. Let's go into that. Right? And let's go into where he says, I don't want to spend too much time on it, and I'm past it, excuse me. But where he says, go not in the way of the Gentiles. Okay. Hold on here. Hold on. I don't. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. Right in my face. I'm sorry, y'all. He said, now these 12 Yahushua sent forth. Let's look at it in context. These 12 Yahushua went forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans. Samaritans is where Paul was teaching in Antioch and all of those places where the Samaritans went into. They had taken over Syria and all of those places in northern Israel. He said, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So in other words, that's a lie. that's just been proven to be a lie. The Messiah never commanded us to deal with them. All right? Now let's get into it. I don't want to skip around a little bit, but let's get into this next fact. Here are 7 churches. Okay? Let's look at the 7 letters that people wrote. And I'm going to look at it from my eSword illustration. He wrote Romans. He wrote Corinthians. He wrote Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians. These are other 2 personal letters to men. But these 3 are letters to people and churches or towns that were literally towns. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 churches that he had spoken to, that he had his letters or epistles to. Okay? Now let's prove something that's different that most people will never get into with you. Let's go to Revelation and let's go to the 7. Let's go to the 7 cities that he spoke to. And John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia. Remember, the lost sheep that Messiah said, go rather to the lost sheep, they were scattered in Asia. He had dealt with the children of Yahudi, which were in Jerusalem. Let's get that straight. So here it is, he was sending them out to the lost sheep who were in Asia under why? The first captivity where the 10 tribes went in under the Assyrians. And he says, John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and the 7 spirits which are before his throne, and from Yahushua, who is the faithful witness, and the first begotten of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him hath loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood. Now listen. He goes into the 7 churches. He says, I am Alpha Omega. And he says, saying, the first and the last, he says, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, unto Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Okay, so they are not the same churches. Only one is the same church, is the Ephesians. And we'll get to why that's different. Okay, so these aren't the same churches that Messiah spoke to, that he considered the 7 golden candlesticks. So Paul proves that he was on his own mission. And whoever he was preaching his gospel to weren't the same places that the lost sheep were, except for the Ephesians. And we'll get to that. But you see that. None of this is in Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira. None of those are the letters or epistles that he even went to, except for Ephesians. And let's go to Ephesians why. Let's go to why when he speaks to the Ephesians and why. Because he has a certain mandate he says, now to the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things which he hold the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. I know thy works and thy labor, and thy patience. This is Messiah speaking. And how thou canst bear them which are evil. So he's speaking to them relating to them, to how he's saying that I know you can't bear them which are evil, and you have tried them which say they are apostles. You got to remember, there's a difference between an apostle and a disciple. A disciple is somebody who believed on Messiah. An apostle is somebody who was sent by him. And he's saying that these which say they are apostles and are not, and have found them liars. So this is the same reason why he's not even dealing with them. Why? Because he goes down to 2:9. He says, I know. He says, I know your tribulation and your poverty. He said, but you're rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which I done called out all of these, Paulo, I done called out Paul, I done called out all of these different men who say they Jews. He says that I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue or are the synagogue of Satan. So all those synagogues they were starting, he's saying they synagogues of Satan because my name ain't on them and my spirit don't dwell in them. And the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit, who he sent for all of us from Abraham's seed, that had nothing to do with them. That's why all of this trickery going on in here. Okay? He even reiterates this in 3:9 to the church in Sardis. He says, I will make them a synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. But behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So he's saying all of them guys there, if you the synagogue of Satan, little mosquito in here, the synagogue of Satan, then you are the devil. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And I'm going to get into that a little deeper too. Let's go to Messiah's word. Remember we were talking about Pharisees, right? We were talking about Pharisees, right? So let's look at what he says what Messiah says to the Pharisees. All right. Let's go to that, because he's got a lot to say to them. And you know what they call scribe. A scribe is those guys who we call Hasidics. Now you look into it. Let's look into that in the Hebrew. In the Greek, rather, which the New Testament was written in. Right? A scribe it means grammatios, a writer. Grammar. See that? See the epistles? A scribe, a secretary. So these were the guys who were writing down stuff. And you know Gentiles are very good record keepers when it comes to them and their law and their tax codes, particularly Hasidics and rabbis and that whole thing, but we're not going to get into that. He says, now woe unto you, you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither can go in yourselves, neither suffer them that are entering to go in. So he's saying you can't get in, and you trying to make sure nobody else get in. What are you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites? For you devour widows' houses. For pretense make long prayers. Therefore you shall receive a greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You encompass sea and land to make one proselyte. That's a convert. All right? Just so we know. Right? An arriver from a foreign region. A convert to Judaism. So he's saying that you can be a convert, but it's understood who's first. And I remember in the old days when I was growing up, the scriptures used to say first to the Jew, then to the. A lot of those references have been taken out, or maybe they've just been reworded, or I just don't read those versions anymore because the King James versions don't really illustrate that like it used to either. I think it used to be a version called Placed by the Gideons, and that in the King James version was supposed to be the closest, but they said that was a little bit closer than this. But I digress. Anyway, he says, "Woe unto you, scribes, you hypocrites, for you devour." I read that one already. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, you make him twofold or twice as much a child of hell than yourselves." Whew, he was serious with him. "Woe unto you, you blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. And whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. Ye fools and blind, whether is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold?" Okay, so he starts getting into that. But woe unto you, scribe, you hypocrites, ye pay a tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, faith. These ought ye have, and not to leave to the other undone. So this is what you always hear people talking about, the weightier matters of. I hate when people say that. Make me want to smack the taste out their mouth, because it has nothing to do with anything. The weightier matters of the law, meaning that you're supposed to have some kind of humanity in your judgment. And the other weightier matters, meaning that you're going to have to step out in faith in some things. Mercy and kindness. But those of them who think like Pharisees, those from the camps and the Hebrew Israelite camps, this is why they're bogged down with that notion. And to me, it's ridiculous. And he says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for ye clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and the platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. And woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for they are like unto whited sepulchres," that's tombs, "which appear beautiful and outward, but within are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness." So in other words, he's telling you here that these are white people. The Pharisees were white people. And let me just go back to you with Paul and Herod and all of them. Let you know the Edomites, and I showed you about Arabs being mixed. But some of them, as we know with mixed people, some of them are whiter than others. So I'm going to go back to you, and I'm going to go back to where... Let's go back to Acts. Because I wanted to see where he showed them the devil first. Where he calls them the devil. He says their father is the devil. So let me just go straight to it. Right? And let me go to... Yes, let's stay in there. Okay. Yes, there it go. All right. Now, he says, now they answered him, Abraham is our father. Remember, Abraham's father of the nations, Ishmaelite, that's who they go by. They go by Ishmaelite. Remember, that's where Paul went to get his revelations. He went to Arabia. He said, I didn't go to Jerusalem like the disciples. I went to Arabia. And that's where they talk about this from. He says, now they're Abraham's father from Ishmael. They don't even attribute. They tried to bury Esau. They don't even want to get into that. But Paul mentions it, and we'll get into that in a second. And he said, Yahushua said to them, if ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. And Abraham was a kind man. He was a man of mercy and kindness and, charity. He says, but ye seek to kill me, a man that hold you to the truth, which I have which I have heard of Yah. This did not Abraham. So he's saying it. He said, you do the deeds of your father. Then they said to him, we be not born of fornication. We have one father, even Yah. And Yahushua said to them, if Yah were your father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from Yah. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do ye not understand my speech, even because ye cannot hear my word? Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning. What does he mean by that? Cain was the first man that committed murder on this planet. So he's tracing lead. If we're going to talk about lineage and seed, this is where he's talking about. And abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own. For he is a liar and the father of it. Okay, so let's go back to when we were talking about white sepulchres, showing you that the Most High was calling them out in Gentiles, why he didn't knew that this was going to be a division among our people and it was going to be used the way it was used. And we're going to go into the other aspects of it. But look at what he says in the book of Acts when he talks about Herod. Okay? Now let's read the text first. Now it says, now he was with Barnabas and Simeon at this church at Antioch. I read this earlier. And it says, named Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen. And when they had brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. All right, now let's go back to the Strongs. Now let's look at what he says when he was brought up with Herod. So that means that Lucius, illuminative. We hear about the Illuminati and all that. This is what he's hanging with. And not only that with Herod the hero, but look at what it says here when it says that which had been brought up with. In Hebrew, there was one word that made up those conjunction of words. All right? And that word is suntrufos in the Greek, but not the Hebrew. But in the Greek, that word is, which means that someone is reared up with you. So that means that these three, Manaen, okay, Lucius, Herod, and Saul were brought up together. Okay, so they were, think about what he says here. They were a fellow nursling. So they're saying that he was brought up, nursed with. So these were all raised together. So he said those white sepulchres, if they were just like the characteristics of the dead, he would have just said, you're like a sepulcher. But he said, you're like whited sepulchres. It's a difference. And let's move on. Because we're going to make our case with, first of all, Romans. He had a letter to the Romans. Most High never spoke to the Romans. And why? Because he know the Romans were the ones who Daniel saw that were that great, terrible last beast that would control the earth and their descendants. So he sent none of his disciples nowhere around Rome. All right? And look at what he says in Rome. He talks about the elephant in the room. I know what's in there. Let's go there then. Oh, that's why I'm not finding it. That's why I'm not finding it. I thought I was in that. And I gotta go here. Okay. Look at that. he tells you, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. Why would you tell people of Roman descent this particular passage where the Most High tells you he hates someone? It's because Esau is a part of that lineage. And we're going to go to an old one just for a quick reference, and we'll get back to Paul in a minute. But we're going to go to, let's go to PDM. All right, excuse me, bear with me, folks. All right. And we're going to go to the book of Yeshar. It's another book written by Moses. And all of y'all know the story of Esau and Jacob, twin brothers. Esau born first. Jacob grabbed him by the heel, you know, the whole story. If you don't, you need to familiarize yourself with it, because everything that we're going through is based in this. Well, let's look at this. Okay. Now let's go to, oops, I spelled it wrong. Too many T's. Now he says, now the children of Chittim are the Ramim, where we get the word Rome, and who dwell in the valley of Canopia by the river Tibru. And the children of the Deuteronomy are those who dwell in the cities of the sea Gihon in the land of Bordia. Let me expand this a little bit. Okay? And he said, and these are the families of the children of Japheth. Right? Okay, so we're looking at all of that. Now let's go back a little bit. He said, now the children of Elisha are the Alvanim, and they went and built themselves cities, and those whose cities situate between the mountains of Job and Shabathmo, and of them were the people of Lombardy. We know that name from Vince Lombardi and all of that, Coach Lombardi and all that crap. Well, anyway, who dwell opposite of the mountains of Job and Shabathmo, and they conquered the land of Italia and remained there unto this day. Italy. And the children of Chittim are the Romans, or the Ramim, who dwell in the valley of Canopia. Okay, so this is a little bit of etymology, a little bit of history with these folks. Now let's go to Chittim again. All right, let's go to Chittim again and show you where Esau's children joined with the children of Chittim, and they became one people. So the children of Chittim are the Ramim, or the Romans. Okay, let's keep going. Hold on, I'm almost there. Okay, now we getting there. All right, now here we go. I just went back. Let me go back. Where he Zepho. Let me go back because I can. Oops. Sorry about that, folks. Zepho. Why am I spelling it wrong here? Let me pay attention here. I'm rushing so I'm not doing things properly here. Zepho was the son of Eliphaz. Now, let's go back to where he talks about. Now, he was in Joseph's custody for a while. And we're going to go with Okay. All right, here we go. Zepho, the son of Eliphaz, the son of Esau, heard their report, and he went forth to meet with them in his army, and he fought them there in the road. And Zepho smote the troops of the king of Africa with the edge of the sword, and left none of them remaining. Not even one returned to his master in Africa. So this proves also that Africa was named Africa in the days of Moses, because he wrote this book. It was called Dinhaba first. Let's get that straight. And I can prove that in this book as well. Well, at any rate, it tells you that Zepho, the king of Esau, or the son of Esau, the grandson of Esau, was leading the Roman army. And Zepho and the children of Kittim heard this thing, and they were greatly afraid, and terror fell upon them. And they said, and he sent a letter to the land of Edom, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, the king of Edom, and to all the children of Esau. All right, so this is when they were separate, but they're going to join together. I'm skipping ahead of myself here, but I believe it's chapter 90. Let me go to chapter 90. Okay. Let me go to chapter 90 and put this in there. All right, let's go back. I got to skip through it because here we go. Now, it says here, now Hadad the king of Edom heard this report, and he went forth to meet him with a heavy people of force, of strong force, and engage in battle with him in the field of Edom. This is where Edom and the Romans were literally going to war. And this is after Zepho, the son of Esau, or grandson of Esau, ruled over them. And instead of joining their people together, there was one and an oppressor, subject relationship. So the children of Esau rebelled against them. And it says, then the hand of Chittim prevailed over the children of Esau. And the children of Chittim slew of the children of Esau 22,000 men, and all the children of Esau fled before them. And the children of Chittim pursued them, and they reached Hadad, king of Edom, who was running before them, and they caught him alive, and brought him to Abianus, king of Chittim. And Abianus ordered him to be slain, and Hadad, king of Edom, died in the 48th year of his reign. And the children of Chittim continued their pursuit of Edom, and they smote them with a great slaughter, and Edom became subject to the children of Chittim. And the children of Chittim ruled over Edom, and Edom became under the hand of Chittim, and Chittim became one kingdom from that day. And from that time they could no more lift up their heads, and their kingdom became one with the children of Chittim. So this is how that story of Herod and all of that came into being, because Edom and them went to war years prior to that. And they become subject and tributary. They became subject to the children of Chittim. That's why Herod was subject to Rome and Jerusalem, for that matter. Okay, now let's get back to Paul, because I wanted to show you something that was interesting. Proved that he was the devil, showed the white man Paul, he pointed out him. Now here's something else that I could never ever get people to answer for me. Messiah was speaking to somebody. I didn't get into Apollos for one, because Apollo There's a story in that. For the sake of time, I'm going to cut through that. But Apollo was a pseudo identity of Paul, to where they were never there at the same time. If you know the narrative, you can follow me. If not, it'd be interesting. Take a look at it, because it shows you that he's speaking for Apollos, and he's telling you. Just let me go there real quick. Let me go there. And he talks about who then is of Paul, who then is of Apollos. He talks about one saying, I'm of Paul, another, I am of Apollos. So these are all of the different times that he mentions him, or Apollos is mentioned, as far as, he says that, now this I say, everyone, I am of Paul and I am of Apollos. I am of Cephas. Cephas is Peter's real name. And the other one says, I of. So these were basically the Gospels that were circulating. Peter and Messiah had the same one. These two guys had their own version. For one saith, I am of Paul, another saith, I am of Apollos. I'll give you another words of just how deep that situation. I proved you a little background spiritually on them by Apollo, that these guys were all some kind of mythological or spiritual gods. They were worshipped, or their identity by their name was of a god. Like, look at this one. This is Titus, which we're not even going to get into. Titus is also the destroyer, Vespasian's son, who destroyed Jerusalem. He has a book relating to Paul in the scriptures, if you can believe it. You can't make this stuff up. Titus, son of Vespasian, he has a book in there. No one has ever took the time to investigate who the hell is Titus. And people say, well, he was a spiritual leader. Yes, that's the way it is in European culture. Think about the Prince Andrew and Prince Philip and all of them, and how the Church of England, and how they got a role in the Church of England, and they got a role in the military. They got on there, when they get married, they put on their military garb and or their religious garb or their priestly garb. And I can get into that all day. That's a whole nother situation. So that goes without saying. But Apollos, particularly Apollos, let's go into this right here. This right here should have get. I might have Apollyon. Okay, I know what I did. I put a zero, a O in there. And look at this. He says, now this is a prophecy where he talks about a fifth angel sounding, and a star fell from heaven, and the key to him was given to the bottomless pit. So automatically we know that this is talking about a fallen angel. Why? Because a star fell. Whenever you hear about a fall, that's an angel falling. So that star fell, just like the angels fall. They fell from grace. They fell from heaven. They fell from the Most High's, his estate and his acknowledgement. Well, anyway, he opened up the bottomless pit. See, this guy had the keys to it. This is where I attribute the science and all that, but that's another story. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there rose out of the pit the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. It'd be interesting to know that the Hebrew word for locust is Gentile. I'll prove it. Let's go in the Old Testament. Now listen to this. Listen to this. This tells you what you need to know about it. It tells you everything you need to know about it. All right, let's find out where he says Gentiles. Okay. It means goy. Goy, you heard Jews say that, and they refer to other white people as goyes. It says the same root as a gave, which is a derivation. And it says a foreign nation, hence a Gentile, a troop of animals, or a flight of locusts. So giving you an understanding of where that comes from. So going back to this, he says, now there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it commanded they should not hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, neither any tree, but only those which have not the seal of Yah in their foreheads. And to them was given that they should not kill them, but they should torment them 5 months, and their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. Okay, so this is something that's yet to happen, but if you don't understand it, you don't understand it. He said they had a king over them, and which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue his name is Apollyon, which is Apollos. Don't get it twisted. To destroy fully. Their name means to destroy. A destroyer. So he was hanging out with people whose name means Satan. Y'all better wake up. You know what you worship. What you know what you worship, not what. I hate the way the English spoke. I don't know why they didn't just cut through the chase and say, you don't know what you're worshiping. You know what you worship, not what. I'm sure Messiah did not speak that way. Like the these and the thous and the thistles. Anyway, that right there should give you Paul. And the Most High is going to give you a reason for it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. I was alluding to this earlier. Where he says, and like I said, this is a comprehensive study, so I know I've been all over the place with it, but you got information that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And this is information that I'm going through it with you, with the sources that I'm getting it from. And I want to go to Acts. Okay. All right. And let's get rid of the Strongs. And let's do it like that. And this is Messiah telling you. I just showed you Apollos and Paul and all of them. Think about that. He got rid of a name like Saul, which is name of King Saul, king of Hebrews in the days of David. So he took his Hebrew name, if he was from the tribe of Benjamin, think about this now. He took his Hebrew name, which was Saul from the tribe of Benjamin, and changed it to a Gentile named Paul, which to me is the French pronunciation of Apollos, because they pronounce Paul as Paulos. Paulos. And think of us with Apollo 11, Apollo 12, and all that. We know what we're talking about here. This is a smokescreen, a shell game when it comes to who you're serving. And that's what they're doing. They change the names, change the image, associated white images with it, and it's different kinds of graven images and statues and likenesses of other white men, but the Borgia guy or whatever. And this is all an illusion. But listen to this. Listen to what Messiah told him about that concerning that. He was talking to John. He said, peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And ye heard how I said unto you, I go away. I come again unto you. If ye loved me, ye would rejoice, because I said, I go unto the Father, for my Father is greater than I. And now I have told you before it is come to pass, that when it come to pass, ye might believe. Hereafter I will not talk much with you, for the prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me. No one can tell me in the annals of history who it was the Messiah was talking about if he wasn't talking about Paul. Paul is the only figure of notable stature to stand up at the time of Messiah. So much so that he has a piece in the scriptures. He's got work in the scriptures. Mixed among, you remember, got holy mixed with the profane? The holy mixed with the profane. You see that? He's telling you that. Hear much as I will not much talk with you, for the prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me. Now let's go take that word prince again. And let's take that word prince and go back to Daniel. Right? And look at the word prince and how he used it to tie in that this situation is the same prince. Not Paul per se in this instance, but he's going to show you the timing and how all of this ties in together when it comes to what they were trying to do. They were trying to overthrow the Most High's kingdom on earth, which was the kingdom of Judah, which was the kingdom of the Most High and his people. And from that point on, the Romans had completely taken over. And the world has been this way since for the last 2,000 years. Now let's go to where Daniel talks about it. Now he says, now here we go. He says, now it shall come, and it shall many, but a prince on his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach shall he cause it to turn upon him. He's talking about Antiochus, I believe, but that's another discussion all in and of itself. But here we go when he talks about the destruction of Israel. And he said, know thee therefore, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah. This is the reason why Herod got the mandate or the commission to build the temple in the first place. Because Daniel foresaw it. To rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince, shall be 7 weeks and 80, and that's the 49 weeks thing. And the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And he says, and after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Meaning that he wasn't cut off for himself. He was cut off. This is another word for saying he laid down his life for us. He laid down his life for us. And for the people of the prince that shall come, destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the people of the prince shall come. Who was the people of the prince? Those who came to destroy the city was the Romans. And the end thereof shall be with the flood. Same reference to flood like it was in Revelation with the woman. And remember, here's the prince of Persia. That's another thing. This is where we get the word Pharisee from. This is where we get the word Pharisee from. And where we get the term Pharisee from. See, nobody's going to teach you this. Because as long as you are mixing the two narratives, the Most High's revelations won't come. And I say that with sadness. Because it's like you're reading two different books. We're reading two different books. One where the words don't make sense, and the other one where it reads like a newspaper. All right, now the prince of Persia withstood me. Here we go. Paras. They don't have that definition, but Paras is where we get the word Persia from. Farsi. All right, and since I'm in there, I might as well go with it. So you understand where I meant about Assyrians and where they came from during the days of that. But let's look at Farsi, right? Okay, well, I spelled it wrong, but Farsi. They just use the F instead of the PH. Ooh, that's a farce. Where's the Farsi at? Farsi, the language. Okay, Farsi. That's the way you pronounce it. That's where we get the term Pharisee. It's just that in the English writing, it's P-H-A-R. So this is who they were, and this is where they get the term scribes. Because those were the guys who were the Pharisees in Persia, they were called the scribes. And that Hebrew word for scribe, which I think was Kaziks or Hasid or Kasid, something like that. I think it meant Kasid, where they get the term Hasidic. Okay? Well, at any rate, that's telling you where it is, where they come from. So it's telling you all of these, their true origin of it. Now I'm about to close this up. And because I got into a whole lot of good stuff, and everybody going to say before I leave that they say, well, Peter talked about everybody, and Peter, and I mean, he told Peter, you know, that he didn't understand his language, and him and Peter were, I done mixed it out. I'm gonna have to go back in it again. But I'm gonna read something from you that Peter did that you probably chill you to your core, because the Most High warned him about him and nobody saw it, which should give him pause. And if you know the story about his struggles at the end of his life, him and Paul were to the point where they were going to go to blows. Well, if Peter saw him, he was going to kill him, because Peter was going around saying things and saying that Peter was co-signing it, and it wasn't true. That's in the book of Philo and other books. Well, at any rate, let's look at what he says to Peter. Let's look at what he says to Peter. Right? Let's look at it in the Gospels. Let's look at what he says to him in the Gospels. Right? And I think it's in John. Yeah, there we go. I'm trying to find where he tells him that, but I guess it has to be in John. He says, Peter, that thou lovest me, feed my sheep. So it's 21:17. Let's go there. Right? Here we go. And they didn't even put that in the Lamb, but that's all right. Well, anyway, he says to Peter, solves that argument about what they saying there about Peter and him not knowing what Messiah meant at the time. Now, Simon and Jonas loved me more than these. And he said to them, yea, Lord, you know that I love thee. He said to them, feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me? And he said unto him, yeah, Messiah, knowest that I love thee. He said to him, feed my sheep. Then he said to him a third time, Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me? And he said, Peter says, grieved that he said it a third time. He said, you know I love you. And he said to him again, Lord, knowest all these things. You know also that I love you. And Yahushua said to him, feed my sheep. And verily I said unto thee, this is what he's going to say to him, his chilling warning. He said, verily I say unto thee, when thou was young, you girded yourself and walked where you wanted to go, or walk wherever you wanted to. He said, but when you shall be old and stretch forth thy hands, another shall gird thee and carry thee where you don't want to go, where you wouldest not, or where you would not go. And he said, this spoke he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And he spoke this, he said unto him, follow me. So speaking to his death, everyone knows in history that Peter and Paul were killed together. So when he finally caught up to Paul, the Romans had Caligula and all of them finally decided to wipe him out. And there was revelings among them apparently because of him, Peter, I should say, having a problem with how he was first saying that he attributed his gospel to the law. And then when he was talking to Gentiles, he was telling them that the law was conducive to bondage and it promoted fear and other things. And if I had more time, and I should have gotten into it, I think I went longer than I did and I expounded on things way too much. But if I did, please forgive me. But at any rate, here we go. He told him and foresaw and prophesied of him and Paul being crucified together. Why? Because he was saying that this guy was leading you around where you didn't want to go. And if you know the story, he was saying things that implicated him, things that he didn't want to be in the middle of. That was basically undermining everything he was trying to teach about the gospel and Hebrew salvation, which is different. Our salvation comes amidst our current suffering. That's why Messiah said this when he came here. He didn't say this after you die. Let's look at this. Let's look at his first mission statement, if you will. Right? He said, now Spirit of Yah was upon me. He came to narrate. This is Messiah. And he went to the synagogue on Sabbath day, and he stood up for the need, and he delivered him. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written. And he said, the Spirit of the Most High, or the Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. You hear that people talk about the blessed are the poor in spirit? Remember, they missed this one. How come he didn't say the poor in spirit? No, the poor. They added that so the rich people who were all religious folk didn't feel bad. So he said, he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, and he sent me to heal the brokenhearted and to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty them that are bruised. See, that preach deliverance to the captives. So this was not something that was supposed to happen after you die. This was something that he was set to do as he came in the flesh in real time. Whereas Gentiles, it's after you die. Now we're going to close this out with something that's a little strange to show you about Christianity and how a lot of everything about our narrative has been known by Gentiles. This is a video, excerpt from a video, and then I'm going to say goodnight. This is an excerpt from a video that I skipped all over that. This was a group of them, the Herodian. This is something else I forgot. And I wanted to add on to it because I'm making my case so we all know that there's no way that you can support anything written by this man. And that whoever's in charge tells the story. And the Christians are in charge. The Europeans are in charge. So they can force us, as they have, to serve anything they wanted us to at the hands of that gun. But now that we consider ourselves woke, and after seeing this study, hopefully you are woke now, because to me, we can't even begin to say we're woke. Just finding out how bad we're being treated, that's not woke. Just knowing how bad you've been treated is not being woke. This is when you're woke. Well, anyway, Herodians, the one that Paul was hanging out with, they're a group of Pharisees. Just like we had Christians, Herodians were those who had a particular brand of Pharisee, conjecture. These were a sect of Hellenistic Jews mentioned in the New Testament on 2 occasions, first in Galilee and then in Jerusalem, being hostile. So the ones who came over, and let's go to where he says that. The Herodians. I wrote it down here somewhere where I had something about the Herodians in there to show you that what Paul talks about him coming from these Herodians, that he was letting you know that he didn't stand for the same thing that the Most High stood for. And that would probably be 14:1. Matthew 14:1. Matthew 14:1. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch had heard the fame of him. We're dealing with the same one. Remember, there's tetrarchs. Remember that? Huh? The tetrarch, the ruler of the fourth of the city, meaning that as of Rome, he had the fourth part of Rome, or the fourth part of their province of the Middle East, or something like that. Well, anyway, Herodian. I wanted to find out where he says the Herodians. Okay, here we go. And he said, and they went forth. And he said, they sent him to disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true to teaching, and teachest the way of Yah in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? But Yahushua perceived their wickedness and said, he said, why tempt me, you hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought him a penny. And he said, whose image is on and superscription? He said, and he Caesar's. Then he said, well, render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and render unto Yah which things are Yah's. And when he heard this, they said, and when they heard this, they marveled and left him and went their way. So you see that? These were Herodians. He said they sent out with them their disciples. The Pharisees had their own disciples with the Herodians. This is insane. But anyway, getting back to what I was going to end it with. It was really cool. I was probably all over the place, but if I was, forgive me. But you got a lot of meat. And it just shows you just how extensive and comprehensive this study is going to be, folks. We're going to get into the minutia of everything. Well, anyway, I'm going to go to this video that a brother of mine, Benaiah Israel, I encourage any of y'all to view this man's video if you can. It's just it's the most awesome, detailed history of when the transition from us being identified as Jews to Negroes, and when they were identified as white Christians to, the people of God, or the American culture that we know them of, the Christian people. But how they were basically known as heathens, and how they got to Christians, and how they became the dominant religion and people of the earth by manipulating that particular set of information, who we are, and their knowledge of the curses and their knowledge of the scriptures, being Pharisees, knowing the curses that were placed on us, knowing that's why I mentioned Paul speaking about Jacob and Esau to the Romans. He was letting them know, and I should have expounded and sort of reiterated why I even brought that passage up, is because he was reminding them that we don't have a covenant with the Most High. The Most High made a covenant with Abraham and the descendants of his people, Moses and the like. We're Esau's descendants. He hates us. Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. That's been declared all the way back in the Old Testament. So he's saying that we have to make up our own salvation and our own religious validity, and and something that validate who they are and to give them self-worth and to give them some sense of royalty and sense of importance and majesty. Esau is like that, if you know the history of him and his mindset. Long story short, B'nai Israel is one of those guys who detailed that from old books and old ancient literature, or not ancient, but old, what I call like antique literature from cartographers and guys who were explorers, going all the way back to the 15th, 16th century and all the way up throughout the slave trade and what they identified us in their travels. And he was watching this video on Amazon, and I saw it, and I have Amazon, and I never thought to watch it because I'm not into horror movies, and he had me take a second look at this video because of the nature of the videos that he had put out before dealing with our history. This video, he was talking about this narrative of this girl who was moving into a white neighborhood, a husband who was an engineer working for NASA and aeronautics, and moving upward mobility. They decided to move into a nicer neighborhood where they, cleaner, to raise their kids better schools, and the hell they were putting them through. And this scene picks up where he's showing us that these people knew that, and they were aware, and they brought up the curses of Deuteronomy 28, which we'll get into in future studies, but how they showing that this nature and how they were teaching Christianity, proving what I'm saying all along about how these people, in terms of their narrative of Christianity, how they know that this is religious dogma instead of the actual history and spiritual application of a Messiah and his people, and how it plays out prophetically throughout the ages. He knows that has nothing to do with them. So their whole thing is created and is a construct of their imagination. And this guy is saying that we got the right to do this because of the curses that are placed on you and the deal that he made with his God. But let me let him pick it up. This is on Amazon from a movie called Them, or a series called Them. Oops.
Why have you come here?
Not your concern, devil.
And just a quick note, she knows exactly who he is.
That's Benaiah narrating. He's the guy that puts out the videos. I encourage you to subscribe to his channel. Awesome, invaluable information. Very astute teacher, anything I say can't be overstated about this guy. Anyway,
or who he represents.
Why have you come here?
Not your concern, devil. What is that I'm here now.
Your trespass upset the order of things. God intended our community stay pure of intention. of purpose, of blood.
Who gave you the right?
The Lord Himself. The Lord Himself. The Lord Himself.
Now, fam, she asked, who gave you the right? As in, who gave you the right to do these wicked and evil things to us? And he replies, the Lord Himself. I'm telling you, fam, be careful of that word, the Lord. In this case, Ha-Satan himself answered to that name.
As it is written, your vile, indolent race suffer toil at our hands.
Not in any book I've read.
Son, beast, have you considered? This shall not end. Let your curse follows you here to our land.
I started it with the 400-year prophecy. This is what he's referring to. And Deuteronomy 28, showing that these preachers and their Christianity, they know.
And will follow you without escape into the next.
Again, fam, he brings up the curse. He said the curse will follow these people wherever they go. And if you're thinking, well, he's talking about the curse of Ham and not the curse of Israel, let's watch and listen.
You had a covenant, a most sacred bond that you failed to uphold. You failed Him on that day.
Boom, there you go, fam. He said you had a special covenant, or you had a covenant, a most sacred bond that you failed to uphold. You failed Him on that day. Now, he's pointing to a specific day in the past of these so-called black people in America that they failed their covenant and they failed their Heavenly Father.
You had a covenant, a most sacred bond that you failed to uphold. You failed Him on that day. I do know this pain. The loss of a child.
Okay, fam. Now he's talking about the loss of a child. What son or child did Israel kill? Who is he referring to, fam? You guessed it. He's referring to Hamashiach, the Messiah. He's referring to the death of the Messiah, the Most High's Son. Let's go to Matthew's chapter 27, verse 22 reads, Pilate saith unto them, What shall I do with this Yahusha, which is called Hamashiach? They all said unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. Verse 24, When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See you to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children.
You had a covenant, a most sacred bond that you failed to uphold. You failed Him on that day. I do know this pain. The loss of a child, once dear, sweet boy, and the whole it leaves, a whole we must inhabit.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. And on that note, she's going to try to give her son back to him, or hit her son back to her. And you'll see the rest of it as it plays out in the series. I encourage you to go to Amazon and check that out. It's a very interesting series, particularly when it comes to a lot of the things that happen to us and our people in this life and in this country, and as it relates to the spiritual aspect of it, why this is a concerted effort and this is a hateful, deep-seated, it's almost like it's an heirloom that they've carried this down from family to family, from generation to generation. And this is why we get no relief in America. But notwithstanding all of that, what we're talking about here about Peter, the reason why I did this study about Peter and Paul, or Paul primarily, is the reason why this is so important for us and our people going forward. Because the two are antithetical. Religion and Christianity is not for our people. It never was. And this is the reason why all of the Hebrew Israelites who do subscribe to this knowledge of who we are constantly misleading our people into terrible situations like this 12 tribe chart. I can't even talk. It gets me so daggone angry. These guys are retards with that. I don't know where they get it from. But at any rate, I don't want me to have to start badgering my brothers and sisters over that. Hopefully this will shine some light on some things pertaining to our history and pertaining to our narrative, and to let us know that we have a specific narrative pertaining to our people, and they are not included in the works of Paul. His works are particularly outside of our narrative, but especially when he says things like slaves, servants, love your masters. And I'm going to close out on that note. I just wanted you to think about this particular passage as you leave. No other prophet in the history of our people has ever told us to love our oppressor. And I don't understand anybody who rationally thinks that this is possible. Then you need to go back and reevaluate everything. See what it is? So he's telling you, they sent out the disciples and Herodians. Okay, wait a minute. I just went back out of it. Let me go back. But he says, so the servants of the household, all of the context is there. Let me go back and get it without the stuff so you can see the context of a servant. A husband in the kingdom of heaven will be account of his servants. A servant is the same definition in any context. And it tells you that it's a slave. And it says to bind, application, literally or figuratively, to bind, to be in bonds, to knit, to wind. And he said to us, let's go back to that. Let's go back to that. Look at that. Servants, obey in all things. Let me get that out of there so you can see this clearly. This right here should let you know that you're serving somebody that Most High never intended us to serve. He says, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling. He's telling us to be afraid like we've been for 400 years in this country. This came from Paul. He taught us this. This is what white Christianity is mixed in with our narrative. Servants, obey all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye serves as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. This is crazy. Masters, give your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. He only mentions anything partially to being a good slave master. See, they didn't follow that one. But look at the way he tells you to be a servant to no man. Let me show you what he tells you. 1 Corinthians 7:23. Look at where he tells you not to be a servant to no man. But he's telling us to serve our masters with with fear and trembling. But he's telling his white folks not to be a servant to no man. And that's 726. 723. 1 Corinthians 7:23. Okay, here it go.
You on the mic?
Here it go. Look at that. Look at this. Let me go up and expand it a little bit so you can see that. See that? Where was it? Where is it at? 726. Okay, there we go. He says, for he that is called being a servant is the Lord's freeman. Likewise, also he that is called being free is Christ's servant. Ye are bought with a price. Be not ye servants of men. So he's telling you not to be a servant of men. So if you were bought with a price, then we should have been free when we got converted then, right? When they forced conversions and whipped us and beat us like they did in Roots. Whew. Thanks for listening, folks. It was great. I wanted to keep going over things. If I went back and forth, forgive me. I just wanted to be as detailed as I could so we have a little understanding of everything pertaining to this, on particularly this subject, because this is the stumbling block. You'll never get to the place where the Most High wants us in these days until you separate what's considered to be corruption. This is conducive to nothing good. This is keeping our minds as a slave. It's keeping our minds as to where we're including everybody and we're thinking that Yah died for the whole world. And it tells you he only died for the children of Israel. Now, if you want to join in that, then that means that you had to live according to the laws and ordinances of the children of Israel. And that's it. And I'm going to leave you with this note. Okay? He said, behold, a day cometh that burn as an oven. All the proud, yea, all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day cometh that shall burn them up, saith the Yah of hosts. And they shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness, and that's not S-U-N, the original Hebrew is the S-O-N, the Son. The Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall, and ye shall tread down the wicked. For they shall be ashes under the sole of your feet. He's talking about us getting justice there. You shall tread down the wicked, and they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this, say the Lord of hosts. And remember ye the law of Moses, my servant. And he said, and he will send us Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. All right. That was awesome. Let me close everything out. Thanks for listening, everybody. And I'll see you in the next installment. Until the next time, shalom, and everybody be safe.